Welcome to our biting expose on how ordinary civilians across the galaxy forsake the Emperor's light for the promise of chaos, told with the detached sarcasm of one who's seen a few too many heresies up close. In this documentary, we'll dissect the origins and evolution of civilian chaos cults with pseudo-academic flair and a dash of gallows humor. From the squalid depths of hive cities to the gilded spires of shrine worlds, no corner of the Imperium is truly secure from the whisper of the warp. We will draw heavily on case studies, the kind an inquisitor notes in a secret log, including infamous worlds like Eustace Majorus, Thracian Primaris, Gudrun, and other bastions of imperial glory that prove to be fertile ground for heresy. Through these examples, we explore the societal, psychological, and logistical pathways that lead everyday people. Yes, even that mild-mannered clerk or devout shopkeeper, into the clutches of chaos worship. Prepare for vivid tales of cult development and behavior, of narcotic-fueled ceremonies in factory basements, of doomsday divination circles among corrupt nobles, of rebellion kindled in starving slums and even in ostensibly holy communities. We'll see how cults remain hidden, how they expand, and the kinds of poor fools or power-hungry fiends who are drawn to them. So grab your flak jacket and your irony, dear listener. The only thing darker than the Imperium's nightmare dystopia is the humor with which one must handle it. Let us begin our investigation into the shadowy coda of Imperial society, the chaos cults that sing softly of damnation while the authorities pretend all is well. Fertile ground, society in decay. Why do chaos cults bloom like poisonous mushrooms across the galaxy? Because the Imperium, in its infinite benevolence, provides wonderfully fertile soil. Consider the daily life of the average Imperial citizen, a teeming hive city of several 100 billion souls, where most live crammed in rusting habstacks under toxic smog skies. They toil endless shifts in factorums or munitions plants, subsisting on corpse starch rations. The Adeptus Administratum tallies their output in quotas and their lives in faceless numbers. Hope is a scarce commodity. Fear, however, is free and plentiful. Fear of alien invasion, of heretic uprisings, of the enforcer's truncheons, of starvation, of the Inquisition's gaze. In such a hostile and oppressive regime, discontent festers naturally. The imperial creed teaches endurance and loyalty, but cold sermons offer little comfort to a man who hasn't seen sunlight in his lifetime and watches his children cough up blood from hive pollution. Rebellion smolders in the bellies of the masses, a fire just waiting for a spark. Enter the hidden provocateurs, those who would foster this discontent for their own black ends. Chaos, ever opportunistic, is quick to whisper to the desperate, "There is another way." The dark gods promise what the Imperium withholds. To the oppressed and powerless they dangle tantalizing rewards. Sick of being a nameless drone, Horn will grant you power to make others fear you. Lost all hope for justice? Nurgle offers comfort and immunity from all illness, minor downside being the boils, yearning for pleasure or recognition. Slaanesh has thrills in abundance, craving change and knowledge. She might let you in on a few cosmic secrets. All the gods ask in return is faith, and perhaps the occasional heinous sacrifice or total surrender of one's soul. A bargain, truly. Societal collapse and inequality are chaos cult recruitment drives in all but name. History, that portion not expunged by censors, shows that whenever an imperial world undergoes severe economic downturn, famine, or war, chaos cults soon follow. A failed harvest on an agri-world leads to ration cuts in the hives. Within months, a new cult of the fertile blood pops up, promising full bellies in exchange for blood rituals. A disastrous military campaign drafts half the men of a civilized world and returns only coffins. Soon after, a charismatic war widow is preaching that the emperor has abandoned them, and other powers will avenge their loss. On a mining colony, the overseers double work shifts to meet tithe, driving workers to death, until the workers' secret lodge suddenly produces pamphlets of sedition, laced with chaos rhetoric, and a revolt, complete with the eight-pointed star scrawled on every wall, erupts. In each case, human suffering is the seed, and chaos is the invasive weed that grows from it. It doesn't help that the Imperium's own authoritarian structure often inadvertently nurtures cults. The imperial truth is monolithic. The emperor is God. Worship him. Trust the officials. But when those officials are corrupt or inept, which shockingly happens with alarming frequency, when prayers go unanswered and suffering only increases, people look for alternatives. All it takes is a single agitator in a crowd of the disillusioned hissing that the Emperor's angels aren't coming to save us, but there are other angels listening. In a population of millions of unhappy people, even a tiny fraction heeding that call is enough to start a cult cell. And from one cell, if unchecked, it will spread like a virus. Make no mistake, no world, no matter how pious or prosperous, is truly safe. Chaos cults can take root anywhere the imperial yoke chafes, which is to say, virtually everywhere. From blood-soaked sacrificial cults on backwater feral planets to philosophical secret societies on advanced civilized worlds, the temptations of chaos span all cultures and levels of development. High-tech or low-tech, destitute or wealthy, an underclass or an elite bored with decadence. Chaos speaks to them all in the tongue they want to hear. The grand objective of any cult, of course, is ultimately to overthrow imperial rule from within. But for most cultists in their nascent stage, it's not grand rebellion on their minds. It's the personal appeal, the idea that by breaking the rules, by praying to forbidden powers, they might improve their own wretched lot. As one cynical commentator noted, in the end, even a man who has nothing left can still barter away his soul. When you have nothing to lose, except that immortal soul, a currency which chaos is all too happy to accept as payment. Thus, the socioeconomic and psychological foundations are laid. Trillions of imperial citizens labor night and day under cruel conditions, and the adeptus and arbites cannot be everywhere at once to watch for heresy. The spark of chaos finds plenty of dry tinder. Rebellion smolders quietly in underhive alleys and workers' barracks, 100 little cults forming like stress fractures under the Imperium's weight. All they need are the right circumstances to ignite, and perhaps a few helpful pushers of heresy to pour promethium on the flame. Next, we'll see how crime, drugs, and the black market often strike that match. Underworld connections. Crime and chaos, hand in hand. If you picture a chaos cult as ragged, robed figures chanting around pentagrams, you're not wrong. But you're missing the more practical side of heresy. Cults don't pop into existence fully formed. They often piggyback on existing criminal or subversive networks. In the Imperium's sprawling urban worlds, the underworld is literally under the world, the lower hab levels, the gangs and syndicates, the black markets, trading in everything from stolen rations to proscribed xeno-artifacts. These elements are already outside the strict law and order of imperial life, making them natural incubators for chaos. After all, a gang leader who's used to flouting the enforcers might not blink at making a blood pact with a chaos demon if it gives him an edge against rival gangs. Perhaps nowhere was this unholy marriage of crime and chaos more evident than on Eustace Majorus, a planet which should have been a model of imperial industry. Capital of the Helican subsector and a major hive world, Eustace Majorus harbored a rot in its core in the early 400 SM41. An illegal narcotics trade had sprung up in the hive city of Petropolis, but not for any ordinary drug. This was the distribution of flects, small shards of warp-tainted glass being sold as a cheap high. Users who stared into a fleck would experience a brief, intense hallucination, a glimpse of chaos itself, inducing sensations ranging from euphoric bliss to mind-shattering terror. Highly addictive and obviously heretical in origin, flecks spread through the underhive like wildfire. Desperate workers and thrill seekers alike bought them from street hawkers, chasing a literal warp high. The result? A subtle corruption seeping into thousands of minds, one illicit transaction at a time. Behind this flecked epidemic lay a tangled web of crime and conspiracy. Imperial authorities eventually discovered that the planetary government of Eustace Majorus itself was complicit. Now there's Imperial oversight for you. Documents later revealed that the Hive's administratum elite had formed an illicit pact with off-world smugglers to import these warp-tainted glass shards from the so-called mergent worlds, planets lost in a warp storm and saturated in chaos energy. Why would loyal Imperial officials do such a thing? Profit and power, the usual. The smugglers delivered flecks to Eustace Majorus, and in return were allowed to bring in forbidden technology, corrupted data engines and cogitators steeped in chaos, as part of a larger dark tech project. The local governors looked the other way and even let the narcotics trade flourish as a profitable sideline. They were essentially funding their secret heretical research by getting the hive populace hooked on warp shards. Charming governance. This case study illustrates how a chaos cult's logistical pipeline often rides on criminal activity. The sale of a drug, or weapon, or artifact that seems merely illegal can actually be the vector of corruption. The cult provides the contraband, or corrupts those who do, and in exchange gains resources and recruits. In Eustace Majorus, the flecked trade not only made the conspirators rich, it created an army of addicts susceptible to chaos influence. One inquisitorial report dryly noted that the flecked users were effectively volunteering as test subjects for demonic possession. Indeed, at least one shard contained an actual demon prince's essence, which outright possessed an unlucky addict. Talk about customer service. Moreover, the criminal underworld offers ready-made networks for cult expansion. Smuggling rings, gangs, and cartels have their own hierarchies and territories. When a cult embeds itself in such a group, it can spread through those channels faster than the Arbites can say, stakeout. A smuggler crew might start by moving cult relics or chaos-tainted luxuries for profit, but before long they're attending secret rituals in the sump tunnels, convinced by their charismatic cultist contacts that the dark gods will bless their enterprise. A narco gang begins worshipping the very drug they sell, convinced the visions from the warp glass are a sacred gift. In the case of Eustace Majorus, multiple hive gangs and even some corrupt magistratum, local police officials were on the take, ensuring the cult's protection from legal interference. By the time an inquisitor, Gideon Ravenor, as it happened, caught wind of it, the Flecked cartel had already entangled nobles, traders, and hive scum alike in a grand plot. The little drug trade turned out to be the tip of a heretical iceberg, a vast chaos conspiracy to use forbidden tech and warp rituals to elevate a local heretic into a godlike demon form. Classic overconfidence from the Ruinous Powers, and as usual it fell apart, ironically foiled by an addicted informant and the very warp drug that started it. But the damage was done. Countless civilians had tasted the warp, and the planet would never be quite the same. Across the Imperium, similar patterns play out. Chaos cultivates the criminal element. The black market provides everything a cult needs: money, weapons, secrecy, and in return, chaos gives the gangsters and warlords a competitive edge. That edge might be literal sorcery, or chaos-infused combat drugs, or simply the unity of a dark creed that binds gang members tighter than oaths of brotherhood. On some hive worlds, entire gangs evolve into cults over time. A territory dispute might escalate when one side starts invoking corn, painting eight-pointed stars on their jackets and offering skulls to the skull throne. The other side, not to be outdone, perhaps cuts a deal with a Slaneshi cult to gain exotic weaponry or sensory stimulants. Before you know it, the hive's underbelly isn't just a turf war. It's a chaos war in microcosm, being waged in the shadows beneath respectable society. Even organized crime at the higher levels is susceptible. Trade guilds and cartels may begin dabbling in cult dealings for profit and end up true believers. In one recorded incident, a cartel known as the Contract 13 on Eustace Majorus started as mere tech smugglers but ended as full-blown chaos devotees trying to unravel reality with a forbidden language. Greed lured them in. The warp did the rest. Such is the progression time and again. Vice leads to heresy. Crime provides cover for cults. And by the time the authorities catch on, the distinction between criminal enterprise and chaos cult has blurred into meaninglessness. They become one and the same. A criminal cult or a cultist cartel, pick your label. For an imperial citizen, this means the corner ganger selling obscura or the back alley medico trading in black market implants might also be a recruiter for the dark gods. It means that seemingly petty crimes can mask colossal blasphemies. It means that next time you buy recreational chems in the underhive, you might accidentally join a chaos cult loyalty program, complete with points earned per purchase, redeemable for demonic possession. Truly, the hive underworld is the gift that keeps on giving, to Nurgle, Tzaentch, Horn, and Slanesh at least. Witchfire and mutation, the unwanted find a home. Society's downtrodden aren't just the poor or the criminal. They're also the different. By imperial law and creed, being born a mutant or an unsanctioned psyker is practically a crime in itself. Those who are visibly mutated face lifelong persecution. They're herded into slums, forbidden from procreation, treated as subhuman. Unsanctioned psykers, witches as common folk call them, are actively hunted by the black ships to be sacrificed or soul-bound to the Emperor. Those who evade capture live in constant fear of discovery, even as their uncontrolled powers slowly drive them mad. Is it any wonder that these people often turn to the only powers that seem to accept them? The Ruinous Powers. Chaos, after all, loves mutants and rogue psykers. They are both its favored playthings and useful tools. In the eyes of a chaos cult, a stable mutant isn't an abomination. It's a blessed child of chaos who can be further gifted with change. A witch with budding psychic talent isn't a threat. She's a potential prophet or weapon for the cult, someone who can hear the whispers of demons and bring forth miracles or monstrosities. So cults actively recruit among these marginalized groups. They offer what the Imperium never would: a sense of belonging, a perverse dignity in one's deformity or curse. The corpse emperor rejects you for what you are, they whisper. But Father Nurgle will love you because of that extra tentacle and those weeping sores. Embrace his love. It's vile and manipulative, but to a starving mutant who's been kicked by every good imperial citizen he's met, it can sound like salvation. Some cults consist almost entirely of mutants. There are chaos sects in the underhives known colloquially as Lost Ones or Twisted Braids, where membership is basically anyone with enough genetic deviation to get lynched in daylight. They gather in the forgotten sump tunnels beneath hive reactor cores, where normal folk fear to tread, and there they build their own society under Chaos's auspices. Pale, clammy folk with bulging eyes and gills, or spidery-limbed chimerics scuttling in the dark. These outcasts find pride in calling themselves children of the dark gods. They might worship chaos undivided or a particular god. Nurgle is a common favorite among mutants, promising comfort amid decay, or even just an arch-daemon patron. What unites them is the conviction that the Emperor and his servants hate them, and thus the enemy of the Emperor must be their friend. It's a tragically predictable logic. Then there are the witch covens. A single psyker gone rogue is dangerous. A coven of them is exponentially worse. On many worlds, especially those with high populations, some psychers slip through the cracks of the Astra Telepathica's black ships. Maybe a family hides a talented child, or a disillusioned sanctionite escapes duty and disappears. These witches often lay low, but chaos has a way of finding them. Through dreams or cult intermediaries, the rogue psychers are enticed to join secret circles where they can practice their powers freely, away from the torch-wielding masses. Of course, the price is that they begin to dedicate those powers to chaos rituals. But to someone who has lived in fear of their own ability, the promise of guidance and safety, albeit by deranged cultists, is enough to override caution. Chaos cults frequently use psychers as communication hubs or oracles. One untrained witch with the gift of foresight becomes the cult's treasured seer, peering into the immaterium for visions of the future, with all the usual madness-inducing side effects. Another with telepathic talent might establish a mind-link network among cult lieutenants, avoiding the need for Vox communications that the Arbites could monitor. A pyrokinetic psyker. Well, they're just handy for starting cleansing fires or defending the Coven's hideout when the arbitrators come knocking. The cult will hide these psychers, protect them from being discovered by the authorities, and in return the psychers give their powers to the cause. It's a symbiotic relationship of the worst kind. However, this is playing with literal fire. Uncontrolled psychers are gateways to the warp and bring unwanted attention from demons. Many a nascent cult has been destroyed or inadvertently ascended to demon chow status because their pet witch overstepped, summoned something they couldn't bind, and got their entire neighborhood consumed by a minor warp rift. Occasional accidents aside, the survivors tend to double down on their devotion after such events, convinced that they glimpsed a miracle when the demon ate their friends. This is the kind of logic we're dealing with. A famous incident showcasing the weaponization of rogue psychers by a chaos faction was the disaster at Thracian Primaris in 338 EMS 41. Thracian Primaris was a thriving imperial world, even a religious center hosting a grand triumph parade to celebrate a victorious crusade. In the ultimate party foul, chaos cultists, aided by a turncoat inquisitor no less, turned the triumph into a bloodbath by unleashing 33 Alpha-plus psychers in the middle of the parade. These were no amateurs. They were extremely powerful witches who had been captured and kept in holding tanks, likely for inquisitorial study or sanction, and the cult's agents freed them as living weapons. The result was absolute carnage, psychokinetic blasts, mass possessions, warp manifestations tearing through the crowds. Chaos-influenced aircraft performed attack runs on the parade route, strafing the terrified public. Imagine a festive day of martial pomp turning in an instant to a scene of screaming insanity. thousands trampled in a panicked rout, armored vehicles tossed like toys by telekinetic force, decorative parade float servitors suddenly on fire, and unseen entities cackling at the edges of vision. That's what Thracian Primaris got. An inquisitor, Gregor Eisenhorn, present at the scene, survived only thanks to a demon's intervention. An irony for the ages. Whereas his young protege, Gideon Ravenor, was horrifically maimed and confined to a life-sustaining chair from that day forth. The sheer scale of the catastrophe was enough to plunge the subsector into chaos. Indeed, the Triumph incident was merely the opening salvo of a larger heresy. It triggered widespread cult uprisings on Thracian Primaris and neighboring worlds, an outbreak remembered as the Helican Schism. Two hive cities on Thracian Primaris rose in open revolt, tens of thousands of cult-tainted workers rampaging in the streets, while simultaneous revolts and terror acts struck planets like Sameter and Gudrun. Millions perished in the ensuing months of strife, all because hidden chaos networks decided to uncage the witches and let insanity seep into reality on multiple worlds at once. The Thracian Primaris atrocity underscores a key point. Unsanctioned psykers are nuclear bombs waiting to go off, and chaos cults are more than happy to light the fuse. In smaller ways, this happens on a micro scale in countless cults. The coven's witch augur might not explode spectacularly at a parade, but perhaps during a private ritual he finally lets one warp spawn too many into his head. The cult's secret ceremony might end with half the congregation mutated or dead, but those who survive see it as a sign of favor. Survivor bias is strong when the alternative is admitting you made a huge mistake. Thus, even these mishaps fuel the cult's fervor. The survivors often become more fanatical, believing they were chosen to live. Finally, let's not forget those who are touched by the warp from birth. Sometimes a normal person develops witch sight or minor telepathy spontaneously. The Imperium calls them witches or latent psykers and tries to cull them. Cults call them chosen by the gods. These individuals might be subtle about their talents out of fear until a cult member or agent spots the signs, maybe a local healer or wise woman with an uncanny success rate, or a hermit who always knows when trouble's coming. The cult then extends an invitation that is hard to refuse. Join us and be celebrated for your gift, rather than executed for it. It's the ultimate recruitment pitch for a desperate wired. Many accept, and thus another highly motivated psyker joins the ranks of chaos. Each such addition makes the cult bolder and more capable of hiding from imperial detection via psychic tricks or attacking their foes via witchfire and curses. So, in summary, the persecuted others of Imperial Society mutants, witches, abhumans, often find their refuge in chaos cults. The cult gets useful abilities and fanatical loyalty born of gratitude, and the outcasts get protection and a twisted sense of purpose. It's a match made in hell, literally. Next time you see the ragged mutant beggar slinking in an alley, or hear rumors of a witch in the hills, remember, if the Imperium doesn't give them a reason to stay loyal, and it rarely does, chaos will give them a reason to rebel. The creed corrupted, ideological subversion, and high society heresy. Up to now, we've talked about the poor and desperate joining chaos. But let's be clear, chaos is an equal opportunity corrupter. It will happily seduce rich nobles, respected officials, and even holy priests if it can. In some ways, these high-ranking traitors are even more dangerous than cults of the underclass, because they have the power and resources to cause far greater damage before they're stopped. And ironically, many of them start their journey to damnation not out of desperation, but out of curiosity, ambition, or sheer boredom. Imagine a prosperous shrine world, towering cathedrals, flocks of pilgrims, a planet practically shining with piety. Surely here, of all places, chaos cannot take root. Alas, it can by donning the cleverest of disguises. On such worlds, cults often begin as splinter sects of the imperial creed itself. A charismatic preacher or frustrated theologian claims to have received a new revelation of the emperor's will. Perhaps he emphasizes an aspect of the emperor that diverges subtly from accepted doctrine, forming a little cult of personality. At first, it looks like just an overzealous congregation. But bit by bit, the sermons shift. The emperor is no longer quite divine. Maybe he's an amalgamation of powers, or maybe there are other saints worthy of devotion. The ecclesiarchy would call it heresy. The locals might call it innovative piety. Only later, when the townsfolk are dancing around a pyre of the planetary governor's effigy, chanting praises to the true gods, does it become obvious that somewhere along the line, the little sect was redirected to chaos. By then, of course, it's too late, and the town is probably on fire. Shrine worlds and missionary stations have seen outbreaks of chaos cults masquerading as religious movements. In one case, on a minor shrine world in the Segmentum Pacificus, a sect calling itself the Communion of the Sanguine Emperor started among healers who venerated the emperor's blood. It stressed empathy and charity, all good, but then introduced secret blood-swapping rituals to share the emperor's spirit. Lo and behold, this devolved into an outright corn blood cult within a few years, by which time many clergy were complicit in nightly human sacrifices in the catacombs. They had so convinced themselves it was a holy practice that when the Inquisition finally raided their red-lit sanctum, the cult's priest was genuinely confused why the emperor's Ordo Hereticus agents were shooting his congregation. He died screaming about being a loyal servant, even as a demon manifested from the gore behind him. Delusion can run very deep. The lesson here is that chaos often subverts ideology by taking something positive, faith, hope, unity, and twisting it. On hive or civilized worlds, we see this with political movements and intellectual societies too. An oppressed worker population might form a union to petition for better conditions, something entirely reasonable. But a sly chaos cultist will join and steer the rhetoric. Brothers, the Imperium itself is the cause of our suffering, not just the bosses. Should we not demand a complete overhaul? Should we not cast down the Imperium and seize our destiny? What started as a labor movement can become a chaos-aligned revolutionary cult before its members even realize it. They might find themselves invoking power from the warp to fuel their rebellion, at the suggestion of that friendly agitator who just so happens to have a red glint in his eyes when he smiles. Extreme political parties make excellent fronts for cults, precisely because they attract the angry, the disillusioned, and the power-hungry individuals primed for corruption. A savvy cult will use the party as cover, perhaps winning local elections or inciting riots under its banner, all the while hiding the Chaos Star in the closet until the time is right to reveal it. Now let's talk about the upper crust, nobility, bureaucrats, and educated elites. Surely they know better? If anything, their pride and craving for forbidden pleasures make them ideal marks. The infamous case of Gudrun is illustrative. Gudrun was, and is, a rich, civilized world, a jewel of culture and noble privilege in the Helican sub. In the mid-240 SEEM 41, it was also the site of an eye-opening heresy. A heretical cabal of aristocrats had been operating there in secret. These weren't downtrodden people, they were heirs of great houses, generals, even scholars. Yet, they had formed a little chaos society, presumably out of a mix of boredom with their lavish lives and a desire for greater power. They held illicit gatherings, masquerade balls with human sacrifices in the cellar, if you can imagine, and plotted truly ambitious evil, including the resurrection of an ancient chaos sorcerer, the notorious Pontius Glaw. They dabbled in forbidden tomes like the Necrotiush, as casually as one might try a new wine. One of their leaders, the charming Gorgone Locke, even managed to capture and torture an inquisitor, Eisenhorn, who was investigating them, a rare and brazen feat for mere hobbyist heretics. Ultimately, it took a full inquisitorial purge led by Inquisitor Commodus Voke to break the Cabal's back. Stormtroopers and Arbites had to sweep through the nobles' estates, cleansing the rot with fire and bolter. The highborn cultists did not go quietly. There were warlocks among them who unleashed demons in their mansions' halls. But brute force and the Emperor's justice prevailed, and Gudrun's cabal was smashed. Still, the very fact it existed that lords and ladies who publicly sat in cathedral pews were privately cutting deals with demons shook many in the sector. Ordo Hereticus records labeled it a prime example of high society corruption by chaotic infestation. We, in our candid tone, can label it what it was: rich fools thinking the rules of reality don't apply to them and paying the price. Similarly, on Thracian Primaris, before the Triumph disaster, there were rumors that certain members of the planetary senate and military command had been compromised by a chaos-tainted conspiracy, later linked to the renegade inquisitor Kishos. The subsequent Helican schism saw evidence of coordinated chaos activity at the highest levels. Even Battlefleet Scarus was infiltrated, suffering acts of sabotage from within. It's terrifying but true. An entire Imperial Battlefleet division was essentially hamstrung by cultists in its ranks, right when the subsector needed it most. This allowed the cult uprisings on the ground to run amok longer than they should have. Only later was it deduced that an invisible ruling elite of heretics had orchestrated these simultaneous revolts, pulling strings across multiple planets. Think about that. A secret chaos network spanning nobles, admirals, and God Emperor knows who else, managing to incite rebellion on numerous worlds at once. The Helican Schism was perhaps Chaos's greatest coup in that region, and it was only thwarted after 8 grueling months when loyalist forces finally crushed the cult armies. It stands as a testament to how far ideological subversion can go, from isolated cult cells to a synchronized multi-world insurgency. When cults at the top have resources and communication, they can act like a cancer metastasizing throughout the body of a subsector. Even academia and the administratum are not safe. A university philosophy club that delves into proscribed texts purely out of scholarly interest can be a kernel of a cult. There have been cases of scholars or tech adepts uncovering scraps of forbidden lore, perhaps a chaos-tainted AI from the Dark Age, or a page of some heretical manuscript, and instead of burning it as they should, they become obsessed. They form a little study group to unravel its secrets, maybe thinking they'll gain some incredible knowledge to help mankind. Noble intention, awful execution. Chaos lurks in knowledge, too. As they decipher the puzzle, their minds get slowly ensnared by the very thing they study. They start rationalizing small heresies. This invocation isn't really sorcery, it's just historical reenactment. And before long, they've summoned a demon host in the campus library. If they are politically connected, this infection can spread outward. Their patrons and colleagues get drawn into the excitement of the Forbidden Project. Some administratum clerks might get involved for the thrill of doing something unsanctioned after decades of rubber stamping forms. Bit by bit, a mystery cult or secret society forms among the educated class. They may keep up appearances by day, attending symposiums, doing their desk jobs, but at night they don robes and speak furtively of the power they will unlock. Many cults of Tsi-Inch, chaos god of scheming and knowledge, form this way, often calling themselves innocuous names like the Seekers of the Third Truth or Athenor Circle, disguising their gatherings as philosophical debates or alchemic research. By the time the Inquisition tracks them down, these cults might have infiltrated the local government's planning office and rerouted funds to their experiments, or placed members in the planetary governor's advisory council. Some don't aim for overt revolution at all. They might be content subtly sabotaging imperial plans and feeding secrets to their dark patrons. Their goal is corruption from within, death by 1,000 cuts rather than open war. Such cults are insidious and very hard to uproot because they wear the face of loyal imperial citizens until the moment they strike. We would be remiss not to mention the peculiar phenomenon of chaos cults among the imperial clergy themselves. Yes, even the ordained priest or confessor who leads others in emperor worship can fall. Usually this happens when a clergyman's pride or avarice overtakes his faith. There have been heretical sects where a preacher thought himself chosen for a higher purpose and began secretly praying to the true divine power behind the emperor, inevitably a chaos entity in disguise. For example, a sect on a shrine world might start venerating a local saint's relic with undue fervor. Unbeknownst to them, the relic is corrupted, perhaps a chaos-tainted artifact swapped in by cultists. And the clergy's devotion is actually being siphoned to a chaos power. Once the chaos influence takes root, that clergy becomes a puppet. They will start guiding their flock subtly away from orthodox emperor worship toward this new special devotion, which of course has new prayers, new symbols, just different enough to be suspect, but explained away in sermons as a deeper mystery of our faith. By the time alarms are raised, a whole slice of the ministorum on that world might be compromised. The resulting purge is bloody. Imagine battle sisters and inquisitorial stormtroopers storming a cathedral to gun down corrupted priests and fanatical congregants, the very people who yesterday were holding mass. It's happened. It will happen again. To sum up, chaos cults often hide behind ideas and institutions that people trust: religion, political reform, noble privilege, academic curiosity. They wear the trappings of legitimacy as camouflage. A very successful cult might even climb to real power on a world without ever revealing its true allegiance, essentially running the planet while quietly serving chaos. At least until they get bold enough to drop the pretenses, roll out the 8-pointed banners, and declare, "Surprise, we're in charge, and also we worship Satan," at which point the phony peace ends in an orgy of violence. By subverting ideology and co-opting leaders, cults can do immense damage, far more than a scrabbling band of underhive mutants ever could on their own. And when finally exposed, these high-level heresies often require drastic response. Blown cover means open rebellion, demonic summons, sometimes even full planetary invasion by traitor marines if the cult had that on speed dial. The ultimate goal for these cults is to topple imperial rule and replace it with something truly abhorrent, whether a chaos-ruled demon world or just a blasted cinder devoid of life. They don't care if they ruin themselves in the process. In their eyes, ruin is the point, and they often come scarily close to achieving it, especially when the cult has friends in high places, hidden in plain sight. Cunning and survival of cults. Given the might of the Imperium's security apparatus, the countless arbites, enforcers, informants, pict cams, and of course the ever-watchful Inquisition, One might wonder how any chaos cult survives more than a week. The truth is, cults have become experts at hiding in plain sight. They have to be, or they'd never get past their first secret meeting. Over the millennia, a kind of natural selection has occurred. The foolishly blatant cults get purged swiftly, while the clever ones endure and pass on their methods, often literally passing tomes of instructions to successor cultists. Let's examine some of the methods of concealment and survival that allow a cult to thrive under the nose of imperial authority. Front organizations. As mentioned, many cults mask themselves behind legitimate fronts. This could be a charity group, Brothers of the Third Mercy running a soup kitchen that also functions as a recruitment center, a trade union, a social club, or even an official planetary regiment's veteran association. One classic example is the use of imperial cult variants, groups that claim to worship the emperor but with a local twist. Since outright chaos worship is the biggest heresy, they often initially pretend to be extremely loyal. So loyal they formed a separate fellowship for extra prayers. Who would suspect extra piety as cover for chaos? An inquisitor would, but local administratum might not. By the time weird behavior is noted, the cult has grown and gone to ground. Cells and compartmentalization. Successful cults adopt a cell structure, much like organized rebellions. Small groups operate semi-independently, each only aware of a few contacts. The cult as a whole might be spread across a city or multiple cities, but information is siloed. If one cell is compromised and captured by, say, the Arbites, they can only betray that cell and perhaps one link upward. The leadership remains hidden. This way, cults can sustain losses and not collapse entirely. It also breeds paranoia, which ironically helps them survive. Members are taught not to trust anyone outside the cult, and sometimes not even to fully trust fellow cultists from other cells. They might use code phrases or secret hand gestures to verify allegiance when meeting someone new who claims to be a friend of the hidden lord, or whatever euphemism they prefer. Infiltration of law enforcement. The smarter cults make it a priority to suborn someone in the local security forces. A clerk in the Arbites precinct, a low-level Adeptus Arbites judge, an enforcer in the city watch. Anyone who can tip them off to investigations. Such moles feed misinformation upward. No cult here, sir. The murders are clearly just a settling of gang scores, nothing ritualistic. And warn the cult of raids in advance. In the Eustace Majorus case, as we saw, even high-ranking magistratum officers were complicit, essentially running interference for the heretics. On countless worlds, Arbite's records end up mysteriously incomplete, or evidence disappears because someone on the inside is literally burning files to protect their dark brethren. By the time an inquisitor suspects there's a leak, the damage is done. Occult cipher and cant. Cults love their secrecy and symbolism. They develop code words, signals, and even whole argos to communicate under the noses of authority. A simple example, two cultists meet on the street. One says casually, "The night is cold," and the other responds, "But the fire is warm." To any passerby, banal small talk. To them, confirmation of shared allegiance, and perhaps an arranged meeting that night. Written communication is similarly cloaked. A cult might keep ledgers of their activities disguised as mercantile accounts or personal diaries, written in a cipher that only initiates no. Some cults have revived ancient ciphers or chaotic runes, embedding them within otherwise innocuous text. There have been cases where entire heretical scriptures were hidden within seemingly pious writings. For instance, an acrostic in a widely circulated prayer book that, when read properly, spelled out verses of a chaos hymn. Archaeolinguists have torn their hair out deciphering captured cult documents, only to find multiple layers of meaning, some of which might even be traps. For example, a code that triggers a bound daemon to attack the reader if read aloud. Nasty. The bottom line is cults take information security seriously. Initiation trials. One might not think of this as a hiding tactic, but it is. Cults often enforce extreme initiation rituals to ensure loyalty and to weed out infiltrators. If joining requires you to commit a capital crime or grotesque act, it's unlikely an undercover arbitrator or casually interested dabbler will go through with it. For example, the Divine Frattery cult famously required each new member to pluck out one of their own eyes as a test of faith. You had to gouge out your eye and craft a special eye patch to cover the remaining eye before they'd even treat your wound. If you didn't pass out or die of infection, you got a bionic replacement eye later for daily use, but during cult rituals you kept the self-inflicted empty eye socket covered with the ritual patch. Now, who but a truly committed or completely deranged person would go through with that? Exactly. Such practices ensure that infiltrators are either caught early, nope, can't do that, sorry, or if they do it, they might ironically be so psychologically scarred or bonded by the experience that they become true converts. The Divine Frattery's initiation was extreme, but plenty of cults use lesser versions. Drink this cup of blood, kill this innocent, scar your flesh with the sacred symbol, etc. These oaths and blood pacts bind the cult together and make backing out unlikely. Once your hands are bloody, you're in it for the long haul, or else your fellow cultists might decide you're better off as another sacrificial offering. Remote and safe locations. Clandestine groups need hideouts. Cults make use of the neglected and forgotten spaces of imperial cities. The maintenance tunnels, the abandoned manufactorum, the old fallout shelter from centuries past, the sub-basements of the administratum building that are officially sealed, and so on. In hive cities, the vertical labyrinth offers infinite nooks. A cult might claim an entire sub-level that was written off as uninhabitable. They fortify it, ward it with crude rituals, maybe even post sentries with reclaimed autoguns at the few choke points leading in. By day, cultists go about normal lives. By night, they slip away to the hidden temple. On frontier worlds or agri-worlds, cults might meet in deep forests or camps far from prying eyes, until some unlucky traveler stumbles on a midnight bonfire of writhing figures and either joins or ends up the main course of the next feast. Many a local enforcer has chased a fleeing cultist into the underworks of a city, only to fall into a prepared trap or deadfall. The cult knows the terrain, the law does not. Some cults even use mobile safe houses. For instance, a cult might operate out of a retrofitted cargo hauler that moves each week, or a hidden compartment aboard a mag train that shuttles between cities, impervious to surprise searches if timed right. Misdirection and sacrifice. When worst comes to worst and a cult cell is compromised, they often employ diversion tactics. They might intentionally sacrifice a part of their own to let the rest slip away. If the Arbites raid a meeting, some cultists will fight to the death, not merely out of zeal but to occupy the authorities, while the leaders and valuable assets escape through back tunnels. Sometimes they even tip off authorities to a smaller decoy cult gathering, letting them think we got them, while the main group goes to ground. The Imperium proudly reports Cult of the Crimson Eye neutralized 20 heretics dead, not realizing those were 20 expendables, and the true leadership is regrouping elsewhere. Of course, this only works if the cult has enough numbers and discipline to orchestrate such ploys. The most fanatical will gladly martyr themselves to cover their brother's escape, believing they'll be rewarded by their dark gods in the afterlife or next mutation cycle. Charm and influence. Let's not forget the simplest tactic, pretending to be normal, even exemplary, imperial citizens. Many cultists maintain a double life with disconcerting success. By day, that quiet, diligent administratum scribe in the archive seems utterly harmless. He's even a model worker who meets his data quotas and attends the Emperor's Mass every Sunday. His supervisors laud his dedication. Little do they know he spends his nights painstakingly copying blasphemous texts and hosting secret gatherings in the archive's forgotten sub-vaults. Because he's so low profile and even helpful, no one imagines he could harbor heresy. Cults often encourage members to integrate and even excel in society as cover. They explicitly coach recruits. Keep your job, smile to your neighbors, volunteer in the local parish. Some cultists end up ushers or choir members at the cathedral. Talk about infiltrating the faith. The better your standing, the less likely suspicion falls on you. Only at the prearranged times do they slip away to revel in blasphemy. An illustrative anecdote. On one shrine world, a devout-seeming group of lay brethren spent months helping restore a grand chapel painting icons, cleaning statues, earning commendation from the bishop. The night the restoration was complete, they used their all-access keys to enter and hold a desecration ritual, turning that holy chapel into a chaos shrine by dawn. The next morning, the horrified clergy found profane symbols drawn in blood over the frescoes these same lay helpers had painted. And those helpful volunteers? Vanished into the winds, their pious personas shed like snakeskins. They had played the long con brilliantly. In summary, secrecy is life for a cult. They adapt to their environment. In the hive, they vanish in the crowd. In the spire, they hide behind silken courtesies. In the wasteland, they disappear into the dust. Cults that don't practice deception simply don't last. The Imperium's response is often reactive. They might not even realize a cult was there until something obviously horrific happens. An assassination, a demonic manifestation, a graffiti of the Chaos Star sprawling across the governor's palace wall. Only then do they investigate, and by then the cult has had months or years to entrench itself. Those cults that are discovered and targeted do everything possible to survive, scattering like roaches when the lights turn on, then regrouping later. Survival is victory for a cult. Each day they remain active is another day Chaos has agents on that world. The Chaos cultists' prime directive is to persist and grow in influence. Even mere survival is a win on Imperial soil, where their existence is an affront punishable by death. And indeed, some cults manage to endure for generations, operating like a family business, with actual blasphemous family bloodlines, right under the authorities' noses. But how do they grow from a handful of weirdos into a force that could threaten a planet? Let's look at their expansion strategies next. Growth and propagation. From dozen to doomsday. Starting a chaos cult might be as simple as a few desperate friends swearing oaths in a basement, but turning that into a true threat that takes organization, recruitment, and audacity. Cult expansion is a fascinating and frightening process, mixing classic conspiracy building with pyramid scheme zeal. Here's how a cult might go from a seedling to a spreading thicket of heresy. Grassroots recruitment. Early on, cultists recruit among people they know and trust. It's safer that way. Friends, co-workers, drinking buddies from the local gin den, any whose grievances or desires align. Initial invites to special gatherings are often low-key. Picture a handful of factory workers gathering after hours to grumble about their overseer and fantasize about revenge. One of them, already a cult member, says, "I know a way we could really change things. Come to this other meeting tomorrow." At that meeting, maybe in a secret loft, they encounter something uncanny, a minor ritual, a robed figure preaching about liberation through dark powers. Some will be scared off, but those who remain have taken their first step. The cult grows one soul at a time. Each new recruit is vetted quietly, often given some small illicit task as a test. As word spreads in whispers, the group might double from, say, 5 to 10, then to 20. People bring in their family, a wife, a cousin, a trusted friend. Before long, it's a network. Promises and lures. Why do these new recruits join and stay? Promises. Chaos cults are very good at telling people what they want to hear. To a poor hab worker, join us, and you'll share in the wealth when we tear down the corrupt guilds. To a young hive-ganger, our patron will give you strength and invulnerability in battle. You'll never run from a fight again. To a scholar, in our circle, no knowledge is forbidden. You can read the truth about the universe. To someone who lost family to plague, Grandfather Nurgle can end your pain and reunite you in spirit. Some promises are lies, some are half-truths, and some, ironically, are delivered upon, though usually with a monkey's paw twist. But people believe because they need to believe in something, and the cult offers immediate belonging and a cause. There's also the allure of secrecy itself. Being in on a grand secret is exciting. Many humans, downtrodden by a life of being a small cog, find it thrilling to be part of a hidden plan that will change everything. It gives them a sense of importance that normal imperial life denies them. Cults often exploit this with structured hierarchies and titles. The longer you're in, the more mysteries you're allowed to know. A novice might just attend chant sessions and low-level criminal acts, but prove yourself and you're initiated into the deeper lore. Perhaps learning the name of the specific chaos god or demon the cult serves. Initially, they might just say vague things like the Divine Ones or the Truth of Entropy, to avoid scaring newcomers with the big bad names. Cultists start at the bottom and see a path upward, a path to power. Ambition is thus harnessed. Everyone wants to become an inner circle member where the real fun begins, if one considers blood baptisms and demon summoning fun. Charismatic leadership. A cult's growth often hinges on a compelling leader or a tight leadership cell. Charisma is a weapon here. Many cults have a figurehead, perhaps self-styled as a prophet, prophetess, or magus, whose personal magnetism can sway doubters. These leaders often have a touch of the warp's boon. Maybe they are low-level psykers or have been granted a minor blessing that makes their voice particularly entrancing or their eyes literally glow with conviction. They tell good stories, stoke emotions skillfully, and create a cult of personality around themselves as much as around the gods. It's much easier to recruit someone to follow an inspiring individual than an abstract principle. "Trust me, I have seen the truth, and I will guide you to it," says the cult leader with a warm smile and fiery zeal. And lonely, angry people find themselves trusting. Leaders also enforce internal discipline. The best of them know when to use the carrot. Praise may be a small psychic healing of someone's ailment to show the gods' favor. And when to use the stick. Intimidation or an example made of a traitor. Under a savvy leader, cult membership can swell dramatically because everything feels tightly run and purposeful, not just random anarchy. Ironically, a well-run chaos cult can have better morale and loyalty than the average Imperial Departamento Munitorum Bureau, which is a low bar, but still. Exploiting society's cracks. As cults expand, they inevitably find more cracks in society to slip through. In a hive, that might mean expanding into new manufactorums or hab sectors. A small cult that started among waste processors might deliberately send a couple of their members to get jobs in the mid-hive water purification plants or the transit guild, spreading influence. Soon there are cult fingers in multiple industries, able to coordinate sabotage or simply draw new folk from those areas. Cults also piggyback on existing discontent movements. If a workers' protest is forming, cult agents join and subtly radicalize it. If a city is suffering from a rash of plague, a cult of Nurgle steps in and says, "We can cure you, embrace the cycle of decay and rebirth." They target those most affected. Over time, a cult that started in one class may recruit across class lines. For example, an underhive cult might manage to sway a mid-hive tech guild member who's sympathetic to their cause, thereby getting access to better resources or security clearances. Or an aristocratic cult might use a disgruntled house servant to recruit from the lower staff and create a bridge to the common folk. Territorial expansion and turf wars. As they grow, cults often run into others of their kind or draw attention from rival groups, even non-chaos ones like ordinary gangs or political factions. This can spark conflicts between cults. Yes, chaos cults fight each other too. Frequently, in fact, given the chaotic alignment. Two chaos cults on one planet may have different patrons. A Khorne cult and a Slaaneshi cult might start off equally hating the Imperium, but soon hate each other even more. Skulls versus excess, not a stable combo. In such cases, we see evil versus evil scenarios where cults effectively check each other's growth via bloody skirmishes in the underworld. This is actually good for the Imperium, enemy of my enemy, etc., but rarely can authorities just let them duke it out. Collateral damage tends to be horrific. Occasionally, though, an inquisitor will secretly encourage cult rivalries to avoid a united chaos front. There are also times when cults merge or absorb one another. Say there's a small cult of drug dealers worshipping Slaanesh, and separately a cult of pain worshipping hive gangers. Not incompatible, they might end up joining forces to become one larger Slaaneshi pleasure pain cult. Because why fight when you can have an even bigger sadomasochistic party together? The new merged cult carries forward, stronger and with combined membership. These kind of fusions are essentially strategic alliances brokered by cult leaders, sometimes at the behest of a higher demon or chaos space marine patron who wants all the local pawns under one command. Ritual escalation. As cults expand and feel more secure, they tend to escalate the scale and daring of their rituals and plots. In the beginning, a ritual might be a handful of people quietly chanting around a small chaos icon. A year later, if undetected, the cult might host a grand ceremony with 100 cultists gathering in an emptied manufactorum sector at midnight, complete with stolen promethium barrels as bonfires and a freshly kidnapped dozen victims to sacrifice. They get bolder. They might try to summon a minor demon to reward the faithful or imbue an object with warp power to aid their cause. Each success emboldens them further, and each failure, well, usually those who fail die, so the survivors take it as a lesson and possibly a twisted sign of who was more worthy. This escalation is what typically leads to their eventual discovery. You can only hide mass murder and demonic events for so long. But by the time it gets obvious, the cult is often strong enough to pose a serious threat in the confrontation. Wider alliances. When a cult grows big, it might seek or be offered alliances with bigger fish, notably Chaos Space Marine warbands or demon devotees outside the planet. Most cults operate in isolation during inception, but a mature cult that effectively controls a town or a city sector might light the metaphoric or literal beacon to the warp. We're ready. Come help us overthrow the planet. Some traitor legions or war bands keep tabs on cults as a farmer watches crops, waiting for the right moment to reap. For example, the Word Bearers, Chaos Space Marines known for spreading cults, are infamous for establishing sleeper cults on worlds decades before a Black Crusade. When the cult is big enough, the Marines will arrive through the warp to bolster the uprising, arming the cultists with military-grade weapons and leading them in open war. For a cult, this is the hoped-for apotheosis. To be deemed worthy of their gods, that actual demonic warriors join their fight. Many a planetary rebellion has been successful, at least temporarily, only because an outside chaos force landed to support the cult at the crucial moment. It's the nightmare scenario for the Imperium. What was thought to be a local insurgency turns out to be the vanguard of a chaos invasion. And even if Space Marines don't show up, cults might coordinate with each other off-world. The Divine Fraternity we discussed earlier had thousands of members across multiple subsectors, acting in unison toward grand sabotage goals. If an Imperial crackdown happens in one system, the cult in another can lay low or divert attention, then reinitiate contact later. They are like a malignant web across worlds. Snowball to rebellion. Ultimately, if a cult grows unchecked, it reaches critical mass where it no longer needs to hide. The leader decides the time has come to ignite the rebellion openly. Often, this timing is influenced by prophecy or instruction from the chaos powers. On the night of the blood moon, rise up. Or it might be an opportunistic moment, say the PDF, Planetary Defense Force, is mostly off-world in a war, or the governor is incapacitated. The cult moves from covert acts to open insurrection. This might start with coordinated strikes. Saboteurs blow power grids, assassins cut down key loyalist leaders, mass poisonings of water supplies in districts that are strongholds of imperial loyalists, and so forth. Then cult mobs emerge, weapons in hand, and attempt to seize control neighborhood by neighborhood. By now, they've likely armed themselves by raiding armories or smuggling in arms. Some heavy stubbers here, some mining explosives there. Primitive but deadly en masse. They unfurl their hidden banners, don crude armor painted with chaos symbols, and go to war with a fervor that professional soldiers find unsettling. As the chaos mobs rush out, the planet is thrown into chaos. The other kind of chaos lowercase. The cult will try to summon aid from the warp if possible at this juncture. This could mean ritually calling demons to possess many cultists, turning willing zealots into crazed mutants empowered by warp energy, or even trying full demon manifestations if they have a sorcerer capable enough. If they had any allied Chaos Marines or war machines off-world, they would have signaled them to attack now in concert. The goal: decapitate planetary leadership and break the back of any response before it can organize. Essentially do to the planet what the cult did to individuals. Hit fast, sow fear, and make loyalty seem futile. However, achieving full planet-wide victory is rare. More often, a cult uprising leads to a bloody civil war. The local PDF and Arbites rally, perhaps confused at first but eventually forming a front against the cult-held areas. The Imperium, once aware, will dispatch reinforcements if feasible, nearby guard regiments, space marines if it's really bad, or just viral bomb the site if it's deemed unsalvageable. The cult's fate, then, is either to be crushed, martyring themselves in a blaze of alleged glory, or to actually topple the local regime and seize power. If they do the latter, the planet is effectively lost to chaos, though possibly only temporarily if the Imperium musters a counter-invasion later. In any case, The cult would at that point transform into a more formal chaos government or warband, likely plunging the world into a state of nightmare. Mass sacrifices, warp storms, turning the manufactoria to build demon engines. You name it. But for the scope of this discussion, that's beyond cult and into full-blown heretical regime. Suffice to say, that is the endgame many cults aspire to raise the flag of chaos openly over their world, to see the emperor statues fall and demons capering in the streets. It's a one-way trip, of course. No world recovers intact from such debauchery. But zealots aren't exactly known for cautious long-term planning. One might wonder about the internal health of cults as they grow. Do they fragment? Do they suffer crises of faith? Certainly, many do. Some members chicken out when things get too heavy. They disappear or quietly try to return to normal life. A dangerous gambit, since the cult will suspect them as traitors. Some cults experience schisms, perhaps a disagreement if they should stay worshipping chaos undivided, or dedicate fully to one god, or personal rivalry between leaders. These can cause breakaways or internal purges. The irony of chaos is while it can unite disparate people against a common foe, it ultimately thrives on conflict and betrayal. So many cults implode before reaching the finish line. For example, two ambitious sub-leaders accuse each other of disloyalty and kill each other off, shattering the command structure. The ones that make it to a mature rebellion are either very lucky or guided by an unusually unified vision, often via strong leadership or an external force like a demon keeping them in line. Finally, consider the variety of cult types. Not all want a loud apocalypse. Some cults, especially those oriented to Tsianch or Slanesh, might prefer to stay in the shadows indefinitely, influencing the world subtly for decades, turning it into a decadent hellhole without ever declaring open war. For instance, a pleasure cult might infiltrate the hive's ruling class and simply turn the planet into a corrupt playground, undermining imperial governance quietly until the planet is a moral husk ripe for outside conquest. A change cult might systematically sabotage output quotas, incite endless minor rebellions, and cause general mayhem in bureaucracy to slowly rot the planet from within. These approaches to victory are less flashy but can be just as harmful long-term. They also carry less risk than open revolt. It's easier to hide corruption than an army. In summary, cult expansion is a game of patience, punctuated by bursts of daring. A cell grows cell by cell, builds networks, secures allies. Then when strength is sufficient, or they are forced by discovery, they strike. Every cult hopes to become the wildfire that consumes their world. Few achieve it, but even the failed attempts usually leave scars. Burnt districts, shattered trust, and a culling of the population. And the most frightening part, even when a cult is put down, if any of the leaders or a handful of members escape, they may well start the cycle anew. The Imperium occasionally crows of exterminating the cult of X root and branch, but one missed heretic slithering into the underhive can be the seed of the next iteration. Chaos never says die, it just pauses and changes form. The cultist's canvas, who gets drawn in. We've touched on this throughout, but let's step back and profile what kinds of people become chaos cultists. The short answer, anyone. The long answer, some profiles are more common than others, but chaos is remarkably adaptive in its appeal. If you have a weakness, chaos will play on it. Here are some archetypes. The oppressed and desperate. This includes impoverished laborers, slum dwellers, menial clerks at the end of their rope, mutants and pariahs, basically those ground under the boot who see no hope. They often turn to chaos as a last resort. It promises them relief or revenge. A famished underhiver might not care if the food comes from a cult's communal table that requires a little chanting before supper. It's a meal. A debt-ridden Hab family might accept a cult's gold to pay off guild collectors, and in return they listen to the cult's sermons. These people often start pragmatic. I just need the help. I won't really sell my soul. Oh wait, now I've killed someone. Guess I'm in deep. Over time, they can become true believers as the cult lifts them, in their view, out of misery. Chaos in this role is almost like a twisted welfare state for those the Imperium ignores. Of course, the price is steep. You might eat today, but tomorrow you're asked to butcher your neighbor as thanks. The ambitious and power-hungry, the flip side of the downtrodden. These are people who might already be in a position of some influence, but they want more. A minor noble who resents paying homage to a higher lord, a merchant who wants a monopoly, a guard captain who envies his superior's rank. Chaos offers shortcuts to power. Perhaps a whispered bargain. Aid our cult, and when the coup happens, you shall be governor in the new order. Or tangible gifts. A Slaneshi cult might give a courtier a potion or charm that beguiles others, aiding his climb up the social ladder while binding him to their service. Ambitious types often think they're using the cult. I'll play along, get what I need, and I can always back out later. They imagine themselves too smart to truly fall, yet by increments they do. The cult will ensure they commit sins that tie them down. Before he knows it, that nobleman has facilitated treason, sacrificed a rival, and irrevocably dedicated his soul. The cult might then expose him. Join fully, or we reveal your heresy to all, leaving him no choice but to ride or die with them. These power seekers sometimes rise to be cult leaders if they fully embrace the cause, since they often have resources and education that give them an edge. But they're also prone to becoming the cult's tools, unwittingly furthering an agenda beyond their understanding. Scientist cults, in particular, love ensnaring these types in convoluted plots. The disillusioned idealist. Strangely enough, some cultists start as idealists. People who truly wanted to make the Imperium better or seek meaning, but became jaded. The classic case is a junior priest or a bureaucrat who witnesses one injustice too many. Say an administratum scribe sees an entire hab block wiped out by a clerical error, wrong coordinates for a virus bomb test. He reports it, expects accountability, but is told to shut up for the greater good of efficiency. His faith in the Imperium's righteousness shatters when a subtle chaos preacher later says, "The Imperium is deeply corrupt. There is a better way, a purer justice that the dark gods can bring." This once loyal soul listens. Similarly, an Imperial Guardsman returning from war, traumatized and ignored, might start questioning why humanity must suffer so much if the Emperor cares. A cult of chaos, masquerading perhaps as a support group or philosophical club, feeds that doubt until it becomes conviction that the Emperor is false. These folks often rationalize their turn to chaos in almost virtuous terms. The Imperium failed its people, chaos will free them. We're doing what's right in a hard way. They often make very zealous cultists because they still believe they fight for a cause, not just personal gain or despair. Ironically, they've just swapped one ideology for another, with arguably worse outcomes. But try telling them that they'll call you a blind servant of tyranny while summoning a horror of tzinch in your face. Thrill seekers and the decadent, especially among youth or the wealthy, some join simply for the experience. Life in the Imperium can be incredibly regimented and boring if you're in a safe niche. Imagine a noble fop who's attended 1,000 balls and hunted all the exotic game on his private moon. He's terminally bored. Then someone invites him to a special party where the pleasures are beyond anything sanctioned. He goes. He's exhilarated. Drugs, orgies, maybe a dash of daemonette venom for spice. And he's hooked. Or a young hiver joy rides on stolen Prometheum haulers for fun. Eventually, that's not enough adrenaline, so when a cult offers him a chance to vandalize a holy shrine at risk of death, he leaps at it. For these types, chaos is like the ultimate extreme sport, or the ultimate high. Slaneshi cults are full of them, from the decadent prince to the punky underhive gangers who paint their hair neon and revel in transgression. They might not even philosophically care about chaos. They're just here for the good times, twisted as that is. However, the warp has a way of ensnaring even the flippant. Today's thrill seeker might become tomorrow's fanatical demon worshipper after prolonged exposure. It's a slippery slope of indulgence. What starts as edgy play acting ends in genuine devotion once they've crossed enough lines and had their neurons rewired by warp exposure in the process. The corrupt and criminal. Some are just bad people to begin with, and chaos is a convenient vehicle for their cruelty. Serial killers, sadists, unscrupulous black market dealers. Those who would be doing evil anyway might join a cult because it provides protection, community, or elevation to do even more evil. A mob boss might integrate his gang with a cult because it's good for business. The cult pays well and eliminates his rivals with witchcraft. A back-alley doctor who was selling body parts might join Nurgle's cult because they actually appreciate his art. These individuals might not have any lofty reason. It's simply that being in a cult lets them practice villainy with impunity for a time and with cosmic justification. The dark gods want me to dismember people. It's not psychopathy, it's devotion. Veterans and the broken. War produces trauma, and trauma can lead to darkness. We saw a case in Eisenhorn's notes. On Sameter, ex-guard soldiers formed a sort of cult, ritually killing innocents, not for chaos, but due to madness. Now imagine if a chaos agent had gotten to them first. Those same traumatized soldiers could have been directed to kill in the name of a gear, turning PTSD into a death cult doctrine. This has happened on multiple worlds. Discharged or abandoned troops, or planetary militias that feel betrayed by the Imperium. Maybe they fought valiantly and got no support, or their world was partially sacrificed in strategy. These are hotbeds for cult recruitment. They have combat skills, very useful to cults, and anger, a potent mix. Chaos gives them a target for that anger, the Imperium that used and discarded them. A Cornite cult could swell with former soldiers, eager to vent their rage in what feels like a righteous fight. Skulls for the Skull Throne, after all, can be anyone's skulls. Why not those pompous officers who left us to die? The Pilgrims of Hate, a notable chaos cult, were said to include disillusioned veterans among their ranks, turning their discipline into fanaticism for a new cause. Even Space Marines aren't immune. Hello, Chaos Space Marines, though that's beyond civilian scope. So certainly an ex-guardsman could succumb. These folks bring tactical know-how to a cult, making them far more formidable. A cult led by a veteran sergeant might actually know how to form fire teams and lay ambushes, unlike the average rabble. A nightmare for local PDF who expect cultists to just zerg rush screaming. The inadvertent converts. A category worth noting are those who become part of a cult almost by accident. For instance, a family that lives in a remote agri-farm has a small community church. Unbeknownst to them, the new traveling preacher who came last year is a chaos cultist. He slowly introduces new hymns to gods not quite the emperor, but the farmers don't realize it. They trust him as a priest. Eventually, they find themselves in a cult without having made a conscious choice. They were misled. By the time, say, the Arbites raid their barn, where secret ceremonies were happening, Those poor farmers are stunned to be called heretics. Some might have genuinely not understood what they were part of. Chaos is insidious. Sometimes it cloaks itself so well that people slide into worshipping it under false pretenses. Children raised in a cult, for example, know nothing else. They might honestly believe their parents' chaos idols are just a normal part of life until the flamers come through the door. The tragedy of these inadvertent ones is either they die ignorant or the experience of discovery breaks their minds. Some might be saved and repentant, but few inquisitors take the chance of sparing any involved. In sum, cultists come from all walks of life. As the Ordo Hereticus loves to remind everyone, the heretic could be anyone: the beggar, the guardsman, the lady at market, the governor's advisor. There is no single profile. If you think only the uneducated sludge workers fall for chaos, think again. Plenty of highborn scholars with too many degrees and not enough common sense have joined the fun as well. The diversity of cult membership is actually a strength for them. It allows them to infiltrate layers of society and provide each other complementary skills. A mutant cultist provides low-level muscle and fanatic bravery. A noble cultist provides cover and funding. A tech cultist provides hacking or mechanical know-how. A psyker cultist provides mystical firepower. Together, they are far more dangerous than apart. And what do they all share? Dissatisfaction and hope for something beyond the status quo. That something, tragically, is the worship of cruel entities that will ultimately destroy them. But for a time, it feels like empowerment, community, and meaning. The cult gives them what the Imperium did not: a sense of belonging and purpose, even if that purpose is to burn everything. In a life of drudgery, to be told, "You are special, chosen, and will help remake the galaxy," is intoxicating. We humans are meaning-seeking creatures. If meaning is only found in the whispers of dark gods, many will still pursue it. One more thing binds cultists: fear. Ironically, fear of their own cult and gods keeps them in as much as hope does. Once initiated, a cultist knows the penalty for betrayal is horrific. If imperial justice doesn't get them, their own comrades will, or worse, the chaos gods might exact a curse. This fear keeps many from leaving even if they have second thoughts. They've sold their souls, they think. No turning back. That mentality can make them fight to the bitter end, because if they're damned either way, they might as well go out in what they perceive as a blaze of glory or survive to enjoy the rewards of victory. Having examined the who's who of cultdom, we have a comprehensive picture of how all these threads weave together. Now, it's time to bring this grim analysis to a close with a final reflection from our sarcastic narrator's perspective. Conclusion: the irony and the abyss. In the grand, grim narrative of Warhammer 40,000, the existence of chaos cults among Imperial civilians is both a tragedy and a dark comedy of errors. Tragedy, because it represents humanity's ongoing self-sabotage, the most downtrodden and the most privileged alike reaching out to the very forces that will damn them, out of desperation or greed or misplaced faith. And comedy of the blackest sort, because from a detached view one sees an absurd cycle, an imperium that is so brutal and dystopian that it practically manufactures the cults that seek to destroy it. The High Lords might as well stamp Farm Team for Chaos on half the policies they enact. In trying to enforce absolute order, they create the chaos, small c, in which chaos, big C, thrives. It would be amusing if it weren't so horrific. Our anonymous commentator, let's just say he's seen a few things in the shadows, can't help but chuckle at the sheer predictability of it all. Hive world authorities express shock that another chaos sect was found in their undercity? How quaint. That hive had a population of 10 billion living in squalor. Statistically, the lack of a chaos cult would be more surprising. The Academy files of the Inquisition are filled with decades-old warnings and sociological treatises that no one in power bothered to read, outlining exactly how these cults germinate. Yet, the Imperium lumbers on, grinding its people, and new cults keep bubbling up like blood from a poorly cauterized wound. For every charismatic cult leader burned at the stake, two more will arise in his ashes, because the conditions that created him remain. It's almost as if chaos is part of the Imperium's ecosystem, a toxic byproduct of its zealous repression and constant strife. A heretical thought, perhaps, but our narrator has the luxury of irony. In truth, this is the chilling reality. The Imperium of Man, in all its might, can never completely extirpate chaos cults, because to do so it would need to extirpate human folly, human suffering, and human ambition itself. And those, dear listener, are eternal. So what are we left with? From Eustace Majorus to Thracian Primaris, from the spires of Gudrun to the ash wastes of countless nameless moons, the pattern repeats. Cultists gather in the dark, swapping the Emperor's stern gaze for the ecstatic grin of a dark god. They develop among the hopeless and the ambitious, hidden by lies and knives, growing until they either get brave or get caught. Sometimes they manage to topple a city or a world into the abyss. More often, they're put down, at great cost, only for the embers to ignite elsewhere. The Inquisition will continue its endless witch hunt. The Arbites will keep breaking down doors. And still, somewhere out there right now, an unhappy soul is hearing a whisper in their ear promising a better way. Perhaps the final irony is reserved for the Inquisitor scholars, like our dear narrator. We document these phenomena. We recognize the satire inherent in humanity's plight. And yet, for all our dry sarcasm, we are not above the fray. We fight it in our own way, by understanding it, by anticipating it, by trying to be a little less surprised when, not if, the next cult rears its head. But there is a thin line between understanding darkness and being consumed by it. One must be careful that in studying the abyss of heresy, one's sense of humor doesn't turn into secret cynicism, or worse, sympathy. Rest assured, my wry observations come not from sympathy for the heretic, but from a fatalistic recognition that this is a battle with no end. In closing, picture this. A colossal hive spire under a blood-red sky, a trillion souls teeming within. By day, all is the faceless grind of imperial life. By night, in 10,000 little corners, candles are lit in defiance of that life. Some people pray to the Emperor for deliverance. Others, in basements and back rooms, pray to anything else that might answer. And sometimes something does answer. The rational part of me says that these cultists are damned fools. But the ironic part of me, the part that narrates with dry detachment, almost wants to toast them for their audacity. They are, in a twisted sense, the most human response to an inhuman reality. When you're trapped in a cage, you either wither, obey, or you find a way to rebel. Tragically, in the grim darkness of the far future, rebellion often means throwing open your cage door only to greet a demon on the other side. And so our documentary draws to a close. Next time you walk the hive streets or attend a grand cathedral service, take a closer look at the faces around you. That kindly old woman clutching her prayer beads. Are those really Aquila medallions or a chaos star worn under her shawl? The pious hab worker singing the imperial anthem. Is he mouthing all the right words while dreaming of tearing it all down? You'll probably never know, until the day the cultists cast off their disguises and it's your door they break down, dragging you to some forsaken altar. Sleep tight with that thought. In the meantime, the Imperium's astropaths will record another minor uprising, quashed on some far-flung world, and high governors will reassure themselves that everything is under control, and beneath their feet the next cult patiently grows. This anonymous commentator will continue to chronicle it with a smirk and a sigh, as duty commands. Such is life and death in the 41st millennium. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, and the civilian populace inevitably plotting dark rituals in the basement. Stay vigilant out there, dear listeners. The shadows have voices, and they are never truly silent.